This is the story of Demetrius Frazier, a serial rapist and cold-blooded murderer who preyed on innocent women, leaving behind a trail of horror in 2 states. From Michigan to Alabama, he left a mark that will never be forgotten. Frazier was born on October 29, 1972. From the very beginning, the odds were stacked against him. His father was never in the picture. His mother, struggling to make ends meet, barely managed to put food on the table. For most kids, childhood means learning how to ride bikes or playing outside with friends. But for young Demetrius, childhood meant survival. As he grew older, the streets became his home. By his teenage years, he had already found himself entangled with the wrong crowd, carrying weapons, engaging in petty crimes, and constantly running from the law. School, that was never an option. He dropped out early, choosing the chaos of the streets over the structure of a classroom. By the time he was 18, his criminal record had already begun to take shape. Theft, carrying a concealed weapon, small offenses at first, but those who knew him, they saw it coming. Something was unsettling about him, something that made people uneasy. Then came the night that changed everything. November 27, 1991. Frazier, desperate for money, broke into the apartment of 40-year-old Pauline Brown in Birmingham, Alabama. She was alone. She was vulnerable, and Frazier saw an opportunity. He demanded money, but it didn't stop there. What followed was a brutal assault. Pauline was raped, her cries for help swallowed by the empty walls of her apartment. And when it was over, Frazier made sure there were no witnesses. He pressed the gun to her head and pulled the trigger. Pauline's lifeless body was discovered by a friend hours later. And just like that, Frazier had taken his first step into becoming a murderer. Just a few months later, on March 8, 1992, in Detroit, Michigan, Frazier struck again. This time, his victim was 14-year-old Crystal Kendrick. During an attempted rape, things spiraled out of control. Frazier, once again, used a gun to silence his victim. A young girl's life was stolen in an instant. The brutality of his crime sent shockwaves through state. But Frazier was far from finished. Over the years, investigators linked Frazier to a series of violent crimes. He was suspected of raping at least 8 other women in Michigan. 2 of those cases resulted in convictions. But it wasn't until later that police would fully piece together the extent of his horrors. The hunt for Frazier was relentless. Authorities in both Michigan and Alabama worked tirelessly to track him down. And in 1993, their efforts paid off. A tip led police to his location. When they closed in, Frazier tried to flee, but there was no escape. He was arrested and taken into custody, facing charges that would ensure he never walked free again. Between 1993 and 1996, Frazier faced multiple trials in Michigan and Alabama. In Michigan, he was convicted of first-degree murder for Crystal Kendrick's death, life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was also convicted of rape and armed robbery, adding more life sentences to his record. But Alabama had other plans. For the murder of Pauline Brown, Frazier was found guilty of capital murder. The jury had no mercy. He was sentenced to death in 1996. For years, Frazier fought to escape his fate. Appeal after appeal, legal loophole after legal loophole, but justice was relentless. In 2019, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his final appeal. His fate was sealed. Frazier and his legal team fought to stop it. They argued that the method of execution could be painful. They even tried to have him transferred back to Michigan, hoping for a chance at life in prison instead of death. But Alabama wasn't budging. The state had already executed inmates using nitrogen hypoxia before, and officials insisted there was no reason to delay. As the execution date nears, Frazier's mother continues to plead with Michigan officials. She wants her son to live, even if it means spending the rest of his life behind bars. The debate over his execution continues. Some believe he deserves the death penalty. Others argue that execution is not justice but vengeance. But one thing is certain, on February 6, 2025, at 6 p.m., the state of Alabama plans to put an end to his story. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and until next time, remember the world can be a dark place.